Today we return to the North Georgia mountains to discuss garden design with one of the nation's largest estate gardens. You won't want to miss it, so stay tuned as we garden smart in Georgia.
These moments of beauty and relaxation are brought to you by Proven Winners Flowering Shrubs, where every plant is performance tested, leaving you free to just enjoy. Find our award-winning shrubs at your local garden center.
Now more than ever, our homes are our havens, where we learn, love, and live. Let garden projects, inspired or simple, bring beauty and comfort to you. Wherever you choose to plant good, we're with you.
DRAM has been providing gardeners with professional equipment for over 75 years. DRAM products feature 9 water patterns and are designed to nurture your plants with a shower of rain. DRAM for lawn and garden, available at garden centers near you.
You have to rely on your gear. The way it feels, the way it does exactly what you need it to do. The F-Pace, how Jaguar makes it SUV.
We continue our journey at Gibbs Gardens through the painstaking yet truly rewarding process of designing and building a new garden. There's so much work that's already gone into this project and so much to consider along the way. Jim Gibbs has been gardening well over half a century and began work on this garden in 1980. His lifetime of experience shows through every aspect of his work. Today we take a look at the fine-tuning that makes for good design. Everything from the placement of boulders, to walkway design, to correctly installing plants is what allows the finished product to shine. Let's go see what Jim has in store for us today. Jim, welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Eric. Great to see you again.
Well, today we're talking about water management, and we're also talking about many of the bones and the structure of a garden, thinking about what needs to be in place for the long run. Let's start with this garden and the beautiful job that you did, and a lot of what you had to think about, many different aspects of this, but one of the first things was with this enormous elevation change, what are you going to do with all the water that's coming down this hill? And you've built a beautiful system to deal with all that, and I'd like for you to talk about it.
The first thing you have to do is survey your property when you're building a garden. You've got to look at the drainage and make sure you accommodate that first, or you'll be constantly having major washouts. So the first thing I had to do was start at the top where the manor house is. That is 150 feet above the stream that runs through the valley. Right below us is the Japanese garden, which is in the lowest part of the garden. And from there, we're going to go up, traverse the slopes up to the top at 150 feet. So we got a lot of water. We're now in a swell, a major swell where all the water rushes down. All of these slopes in here are feeding water into this drainage area. So we've got to figure out how to manage all this water. Now at the top, where the manor house is, we've got roof runoff, and it runs fast. We've got terraces, patios. It hits and runs off fast. We've got gutters that have to empty onto that, fast runoff. We've got walkways that go through there, pool decks, all these things you've got to consider. At some point, when you have a walkway, you've got to have pipes put under that walk to carry that water. So you've got to think of the sizing of your pipes. Now, at the top, we have less water, so we could work with 8-inch pipes, that's the diameter, or we could, as we picked up more water, we could go up to maybe a 12-inch diameter pipe to carry the water. Then when you come on down, like when we were at the top of this garden, the conifer garden, we had to put an 18-inch diameter pipe in to carry all the water from the top we'd already collected from all that land. Now, above us right here is another level. Just from that 18 up there to here, we had to size up to 24 inches. That would have never worked. It would have washed this whole walkway out. The water would have overflowed over the walks to wash the plants out. Everything would have come out of here. Now, from this 24-inch pipe right below us, it's going to go into another 24-inch right there. Now, that's under that walkway. But below that, look at all the water we've now collected. So we've got a 36-inch pipe down there to carry it on down to the stream, which goes into the valley. So you've got to think about your water. A few days ago, we had 7.5 inches of rain in one day. A lot of rain. If we hadn't put this size pipe in, it would have washed everything out. So we designed it to be a wet weather stream, but it's a dry stream. So you've got to make sure you place the rocks and do all that. But the garden has to be thought out for drainage. We have a tremendous amount of water, but even a residence has roof water, then it comes into gutters. The gutters come out, you got to get that off, and then if you cross a walkway, you got to have some kind of pipe. So it depends on the size. So think about your water management and your drainage most of all.
And there are many, many clever ideas throughout Gibbs Garden of ways that you've employed to even slow down the flow of the water, or to break, the water and to divert it in certain, in certain directions. Erosion can be devastating to a garden. And so this is one of the things at the very top of the list we've got to think about when we're building a garden. And even if you don't have a steep elevation change like this, let's say that your garden is basically level. Well, you could also have problems there with water pooling and creating wet areas where you're not able to grow what you want to grow. So in those areas, we've got to put in drainage as well and divert that water somewhere else so that we can keep the plants healthy and happy, have enough oxygen for the roots to grow, and then also to protect the garden against erosion and washouts that could kill plants and remove valuable soil from our garden.
Now, you mentioned a level area. Sometimes level areas, you've got to put drain tile in below the surface, maybe 18 inches, with gravel and 4-inch drain tile covering it and filter cloth to let the water drain in and be sure you find an outlet for it, or all of your plants will die because they get too much water.
Right, absolutely. We see that all the time, but it can be as dangerous as a scenario where you've got an elevation change and you're not able to get that water directed and moved away from. Jim, I remember well the first time I visited the Japanese garden here at Gibbs Garden. Honestly, one of the most impressive things was the way that you use boulders. It's very important to good garden design. It's also been very important to the overall aesthetic of Gibbs Garden. And I'd like for you to just talk about your use of boulders in the conifer garden.
I go back to examples. I love to go to Canada because it's cool in the summer up there. But when you get into those alpine settings, you'll normally find natural outcrops of rock, and they're like shelves of rock, and then all of the different conifers that are surrounding them. So what I like to do is work stones and boulders into the conifer garden because they are as interesting as the plants. You've got plants that have different shapes and different forms, but the boulders are the same way. They have interesting form. They have different kinds of a texture that will contrast. They also have great color contrast, and the colors go with the tree trunks in the garden. But if you look around us, you've got these gray colors in all the tree trunks. But look at the stones. They have those natural colors which work well. So it brings all of that together, and it makes this drainage area look like it was always here.
Right.
And it doesn't look like I built it to take the water out to the stream below, but it looks like it was just here. It's real important, I think, though, to go and select your rocks, boulders personally, which I did. I bought most of my stones from places like Jasper or up as far as Blue Ridge, Georgia, different places. And they got tired of seeing me come because, I'm here to look for stones. Well, I did have to personally select all these stones. Some of these stones in here are 2,000 pounds, a ton. We had to bring in a huge machine to lift those. We had to strap them with seatbelt strapping to position them so we didn't scar them up, and then swing them around and position them. And then I had to make sure that we got the shape and the form in position. Now that takes a lot of time to do the stones. Also, the worst thing you can do is just plop a stone down and think it's going to be a part of the garden. You normally have to dig first a hole to set the stone into it to make it look like a natural outcrop where it's coming out of the ground. So you may lose a third of the size of the stone because it's buried beneath the ground. But that's important. It's got to look natural. You're here at a time where we finished the selection of the boulders. They're all in place. We've just begun to put some of the softening elements around the stones in this area, but we'll continue to put little plants to hang over the stones, to hang down into these sides and soften them. So all those are little added plant, but for example, the Sedum angelonia is a great chartreuse color. Then you have a little vertical coming out of there with the chartreuse of the ogon that comes up, or the euphorbias. And you mix that in with all these other textures and colors of the conifers, and you soften the garden and all the rocks. So we're standing in an area that section has been softened. We have done nothing to soften these rocks, but all these little crevices in between, we will fill dirt into those and put little tiny ground covers that creep and sort of grow through those cracks and really create a lot of interest. I think stones are just as important as plants, and you might even have 3 stones in one place in your garden and create a little area just to add some interest. So it's just like if you wanted to add a piece of sculpture.
Absolutely. I think when stones are done well, it transports us to a different space. When I'm standing here in this conifer garden, I feel like I'm somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. It doesn't feel like I'm in North Georgia. And to your point, the way that we use them is so important. It's selecting the right boulder for the right place, but then also making them look as natural as possible.
Naturalize the site. You did everything. You brought nature into it. Now it naturalizes everything. It brings everything in, and it's not just isolated. It's a part of nature. It's a part of this overall environment. It's a part of all the plant collections. But these kind of areas have got to flow and work together. So it's taking a little section of one and then it joins another, but nature is flowing in and out. It's a walk through nature from one area to the next. And that sort of ties all of Gibbs Gardens together.
Jim, as we talk about the bones of a garden, one thing that is so important to keep in mind as well is where our pathways are going to be. That's the way that we use the gardens, the way that we enjoy the garden. And I know that you put tremendous effort into planning the pathways before you basically start doing anything in a garden. I want you to discuss that with us.
Well, the first thing I do is what you said, is design the pathways or walkways. And you've got to make sure that people that visit a garden, if it's on a hillside, you don't have too many steps because they can be very slippery and very dangerous. Anytime you have a steep slope, if you can take a longer distance and grade it, you get the percent of grade to be much more gentle. So what I had to do here was bring in over 1,000 cubic yards. In fact, it ended up being 1,800 cubic yards of fill dirt. Now that's 300 truckloads of fill dirt just to get these walkways so you could gently walk on them and make the climb up or down without falling. So that was a consideration to do. Now the other thing you've got to think about is once you get it graded and you put it in, what is your surface that you're going to choose?
Right.
Well, I chose a special surface called chip seal. And what chip seal is, it's a liquid asphalt heated at a temperature of between 150 degrees to 185 degrees. It is so hot it becomes liquid. You put down a base of 57 stone and you compact that in to the fill dirt. After you finish that, you come in with this liquid asphalt, and it's a sprayer that goes across the walkway. and it's coming out in a liquid form and goes on top of the base 57 stone. They're coming right behind it, putting these little tiny particles of 87 stone into the top of that liquid, and it goes down in the liquid and all comes together, and then you're sprinkling it on top as the process goes on. So this forms these little tiny stones in there that give these little spaces, so when they come in with the steel drum compactor, it compacts all of that together and squeezes it and mashes it together. And then what happens is in the wintertime, you don't have to worry so much about water getting in there. If you do an asphalt driveway, so often it'll get cracks. And then the cracks will open up when it rains, and then the temperatures drop, it freezes. That causes it to expand and it pops up more, and it gets worse and worse. This doesn't occur with this. So what this is too, the advantage, we have walkways in here. You could never get an asphalt truck in here or even a concrete truck. So we had to think, what do we use? So this is a special process. This is 1/4 the cost of if you put a concrete walk in. Wow. It's 1/2 the cost if you put an asphalt walk in. And it looks much better. Don't forget, this gray color of the granite stone is the same color of the tree trunks all around us. So it brings all of this together and forms nature. Now another thing, if you come back in 1 year and look at this walk, it's going to look totally different. We get all kinds of stains on the walk. Oak trees give you acorns. Hickory trees give you hickories. Those stain the walkways, and the leaves themselves cause staining of walkways are new. So all of this will take on a much more natural, it'll look exactly like all the tree trunks that you see in this garden. So that's important. I want it to be natural and really bring nature together. But if you look at all the walks that I weave through the property, this is just a curvilinear walk that is flowing, and it's like a thread that just weaves in and out and takes your person on all these wonderful views of the plants. This surface, if you're on it, is rough enough that you don't slide down and the water drains off of it. You have to make sure on a walkway, you don't want it to be lower on the upper side or it'll catch all the water coming down. You want the water to come down a hill and to slope right across. Keep the water moving across the walk. Don't let it ditch on one side or dig out deeper and deeper and deeper. You've got to make sure the water flows down, but it flows across and then down again and across and down again. It is cushioned. When you walk on it, it's not a hard surface. It feels like it's giving, which it does. It actually is like a cushioned walkway, but this is a great walkway. Chip seal, and Joe McQuarrie with MDI did this walkway for me. He did a great job, and it's perfect. Works out great.
Well, and you mentioned just how natural it feels compared to asphalt or concrete. You're exactly right. This basically mimics the color in these beautiful white oaks and hickories. It's almost the exact same, kind of bright white gray color, and also the advantages of having it just kind of age in time. But these pathways, they look like they belong, and they look like they've always been here, and it becomes just a natural feature of the garden. There's the practical components of it being the way that people travel through the garden, but then also those practical things can also be beautiful, and these pathways certainly are. Jim, one more item I'd like for us to discuss before we leave you here today is planting on a vertical slope, and especially where we have significant elevation changes. We don't ideally want to just go in and pop our plants into the ground. We need to think about how is that plant going to be best presented where we have a significant elevation change. And of course, this was something that you had to definitely keep in mind, as that's really what this site is.
We had to, of course, with the steeper slopes here, think about the plants that grow vertically and the plants that grow horizontally. So if you have a vertical plant, you want to be sure that when you plant on a steep slope, you dig back into the slope to take that soil and use it in the front of the plant when it's planted. But you got to create a level surface when you plant the plant so it remains vertical, because that was the way it was grown. If it is a plant like a juniper or cephalotaxis or a dwarf hemlock, something like that, they spread out and they're going to grow prostrate. So you can dig a hole and actually when you plant them in on the angle of the slope. So it's real important, and it takes more soil to bring in to plant vertically. For example, the plant behind you is a cut leaf dwarf dissected maple, and it was a very large ball of earth. So we dug out from behind trying to create a level area to plant, but there wasn't enough soil to do that. So we had to bring in more soil to get that level surface, so when the plant was planted it looked natural. And then we sloped around and had to put more soil in to blend into the steeper hillside. But it's real important to think about the slope and trying to make it natural. I had a client once that called me to come out to her property, and she wanted me to help her with it. And I walked in and I was in shock when I saw her slope, and she had started planting plants. And I thought, I've got to be tactful here, but this lady's planting all these plants improperly. But she had vertical plants stuck into the side of the hillside, so they were sticking out at an angle, but they were supposed to grow vertically.
Right.
She had the horizontal plants, of course, in the side, so they look natural. But the vertical plants have to look vertical. The horizontals have to spread out on the slope. Well, when we finished it, she loved it, could not believe what a difference it made. So some people make a mistake on the slope, and they put the verticals at an angle. They don't look natural on an angle. Now, in 20 years, the plant would finally grow out and start growing up to the sun. But then you would have all these plants that are sticking out and curving back up to the sun, so that doesn't look natural either. If you had one plant like that, it would be okay. But if you had 200 varieties of dwarf conifers, and we want the vertical scale, and that's what we're looking for. But just that dissected maple behind you, you came from rare trees. Brent Marcus from a rare tree nursery out in near Portland, Oregon, has a real select rare tree and lots of dwarf conifers, and he provided all the dwarf conifers for the garden. But it had a huge ball of earth on it. Well, we had to dig so much into the hillside to get it steeper on the back and get enough dirt, but it still wasn't enough. So I had to have the men bring in more soil to get out there enough to then slope back into the bank. But when you look at those plants, they still look natural because they're planted properly. But you've got to think about the plant material, and if it's a vertical, the scale is growing vertical, you got to plant it vertical. If it's horizontal or prostrate, you can plant it that way. So just think about planting on a hillside.
Jim, once again, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. It's been an amazing day.
Thank you, Eric. It was great to see you again. Thanks.
Each week we travel the country north to south, east to west, visiting some of the most exciting gardens, as well as talking to industry horticulturalists about design principles, new plants, and also how you can be most successful with your home gardens. We also love answering your gardening questions, so visit us on the web at GardenSMART.com.
These moments of beauty and relaxation are brought to you by Proven Winners Flowering Shrubs, where every plant is performance tested, leaving you free to just enjoy. Find our award-winning shrubs at your local garden center.
Now more than ever, our homes are our havens, where we learn, love, and live. Let garden projects, inspired or simple, bring beauty and comfort to you. Wherever you choose to plant good, we're with you.
DRAM has been providing gardeners with professional equipment for over 75 years. DRAM products feature 9 water patterns and are designed to nurture your plants with a shower of rain. DRAM for lawn and garden, available at garden centers near you.
You have to rely on your gear. The way it feels, the way it does exactly what you need it to do. The F-Pace, how Jaguar makes it SUV.
There certainly was a lot we learned today, and there's much more to come. We return to Gibbs Gardens next week to take a close look at the exciting plants that makes this garden so unique. If you have questions about anything you've seen today, visit us on the web at GardenSMART.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. And remember, even if you're a master gardener, there's always more to learn. So join us next week for more great gardening tips and ideas as we garden smart.